The first message would be about learning from cultural differences. In learning from cultural differences, I looked at a Dutch researcher into cultures. His name is Geert Hofstede, and he's internationally famous, not only in the Netherlands, but he's very well known for his work into researching cultures. And what he basically has is a framework with dimensions on culture, where you can measure different countries, and he's measured many countries, and so you can compare them without judging. So I will just briefly mention the dimensions to explain a bit, but I won't go into too much detail. So I'll start with the first dimension, which is power distance index. And the power distance index means the extent to which a community expects and also accepts that there's inequality in how the power is divided in a community, in an organization, or in a government institution. So the second one is individualism. That's the extent to which the culture is based on individuals, where each individual is very much responsible for their own situation. And the opposite would be collectivism, where you have a very strong group sense, strong family values, strong organizational values as a group, and you do many things as a group. The third one is masculinity, and that's basically, it doesn't necessarily go about men and women, but it's based on masculinity. Is the higher the masculinity, the more assertiveness and competitiveness there is within the culture, and the more feminine is more caring and a bit more calm and relaxed. So the next one is uncertainty avoidance index. That's the extent to which a community is trying to avoid any uncertainty and ambiguity in how they can cope with that. And the last one is long-term orientation. So are we focused on long-term objectives, long-term goals? What does it mean for the future? Or are we more short-term oriented, where we look just what's ahead this day, what will happen this day on the short term? So the next slide will show the two countries, the Netherlands, where I'm from, and the Philippines compared. So left you'll see the Netherlands, right you'll see the Philippines. And what you can see, the first one on the left, the PDI, the power distance index. You can see the Philippines has a much higher power distance index. And that means that the community expects and accepts that there's a big difference in powers within communities, within organizations, and within government structure. And in this 8 months, 9 months in the Philippines, I've really seen that. I've seen people go to the mayors like this, and they really see the difference between mayors and their own situation. And there's a big gap between them in how the power is distributed. And in the Netherlands, it's a bit lower, so the way it's perceived by the community is less. So you can have a more open discussion, equal discussion on the levels. Also, the Philippines has a higher masculinity index. That means there's a bit more competitiveness and also assertiveness in the community. And that you can see with, for example, the jeepneys. You have to have the best and the nicest looking jeepney. You have to have the best and nicest looking motorbike. You can see so many motorbikes with the big nice wheels, nice colors, paintings on it. And the same goes for cell phones. You have to have the best and the latest cell phone. That's what you can see in the competitiveness in the Philippines. But it also says if the masculinity is higher, that also means there's a bit bigger difference between men and women in the community. And perhaps because that is quite high in the Philippines, perhaps that's why FISO has told me sometimes female volunteers have difficulties in their placement, because they are not expecting this in a culture. So it's good to be aware of this. So when you look at the Netherlands has a much higher individual value. The Netherlands, you can see the second one, is very high. It's almost the highest in the whole world. That means the Netherlands is very aimed at the individual. You have to take care of yourself, you have to take responsibility for yourself, and the family ties are much more loose. You don't see your family that often, and you're not obliged to take care of your family, although you do, but not as much as the Philippines. In the Philippines you can see a much more group-oriented situation, where you have big families, everything has to be done in groups. You can also see that at MBMC and in the government. There are so many committees, groups, barangays, committees within barangays. For the MBMC, you have to have a B pharmacy on each barangay, you have to have M pharmacy, you have I pharmacy, and everything is done in groups and to work in groups. So that's a big difference also for me to adapt, where you think you point task to person and the individual is responsible and that's the one who's going to do it. But it doesn't work like this in all cultures, and that's also something we have to be aware of. And the last one, long-term orientation, is a bit higher in the Netherlands. That means we're a bit more focused on the future, seeing what it means, what we're doing, not only for today, but also for the future, making plans according to that. And the Philippines is a bit more short-term oriented. So my friend who showed me this framework said, well, if you have to work at MUMC where you want to protect the bay for the future, you can have a difficult time because they are much focused on the short term. But I've also learned that being short-term focused can have many good benefits, because if you're too much planning and always saving and not enjoying life because you're thinking ahead, you don't take the moment, you don't seize what's ahead of you, you don't enjoy the sea and things like that. You're too much focused. So I think it has many good values as well, the short term. The last one, avoidance index, is quite similar. So what can we learn? It's to think about selecting the best from two worlds. You cannot change cultures, but if you are aware of the strengths and weaknesses of each of these dimensions, you can really learn from each other. And it's also about understanding and respect. One culture cannot force its own culture onto another culture, so you have to try to understand each other and then work together and respect each other and don't judge. I learned that the Philippines has 2 time zones, Americano time and Filipino time. And generally meetings always start Filipino time and lunch starts Americano time. And it's very nice to have experienced that.